Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program, and up next are tonight's top stories. The IAEA rebukes Iran before new round of key talks. Tehran hits back and opens new enrichment site in response. Next up, 250 killed in occupation massacre targeting Gaza aid lines. Humanitarian crisis deepens with relief efforts paralyzed by a total communications blackout. Also in our headlines, Morocco's crackdown on activists sparks outcry. New report slams Makhzen regime's abuses of human rights for political gains. And in Libya, presidential order outlaws armed rallies, meets UN envoy and backs UN peace efforts as the mission begins advisory review. The details shortly. Welcome back to the program. We kick off our news tonight with Iran nuclear file. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi announced Sunday as the date for a sixth round of nuclear talks between Iran and the United States to be mediated by Oman. The move follows last month's negotiations in Rome, where Omani officials cited some progress, while Tehran has received Washington's latest proposal. It dismissed key parts as ambiguous, casting doubt on a swift breakthrough. The International Atomic Energy Agency's 35-member governing board passed a resolution Thursday declaring Iran non-compliant with its nuclear safeguards obligations since 2019, according to Reuters. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, speaking from Oslo, warned the move would complicate Sunday's planned nuclear talks with the United States and Oman, but affirmed Tehran's readiness to defend its principled positions. Iran's foreign ministry escalated tensions further by directly blaming the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi for undermining the agency's credibility through what it called a politically motivated and biased approach to Iran's nuclear program. In response, Iran will build a new uranium enrichment site and upgrade Fordo with advanced centrifuges, officials declared Sunday or Thursday, retaliating against the IAEA's resolution. The Atomic Energy Organization and Foreign Ministry jointly condemned the vote as violating Iran's nuclear rights and sovereignty, framing the expansions as lawful, peaceful nuclear rights. In a related note, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian stressed that Tehran does not seek confrontation but will not yield to pressure, affirming that talks with the United States are guided by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's directives. During a visit to Ilam province in Iran, Pezeshkian firmly rejected halting Iran's nuclear research and waiting for a U.S. approval to access nuclear materials for industrial, medical, agricultural, and scientific use. He also denounced U.S. demands to prevent scientific research and dismantle Iran's nuclear industry.
Today we are in a situation where America and Europe are trying to impose the most sanctions and pressure on our people and our country. They are doing this because they, America and the West, think that they can stop our progress with these pressures. Let us believe and put our support in God. We are able to overcome all problems. We are devoted to God. As a result, we are not devoted to America and its allies. This does not mean that we want to fight the world. We want to talk to the world. We will not submit to force, oppression, and bullying.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander Hossein Salami declared that Iran's naval forces are prepared to confront any potential threats, according to state media. Speaking to Mehr news agency, Salami emphasized Tehran's commitment to safeguarding its regional and maritime interests, noting that the Navy's combat readiness, both operational and intelligence-based, is under constant evaluation. In the same context, U.S. President Donald Trump said he expects the Zionist entity to strike Iran, but stopped short of calling it imminent. At a Washington press conference, he urged Tehran to make concessions in the nuclear talks, claiming a deal is near. Trump said that he prefers diplomacy over war, but confirmed U.S. personnel are being relocated from the Middle East, which he described as increasingly dangerous amid rising tensions with Iran. Switching focus to the war in Gaza, occupation attacks killed 58 Palestinians in the Strip on Thursday, including 19 civilians awaiting aid near the Netzarim corridor, according to medical sources report. Over 200 were wounded in the attack, described as direct fire on aid lines. Separate airstrikes hit displacement camps in Khan Yunis as well. Similarly, occupation forces killed 21 Palestinians and wounded 294 Thursday in attacks on designated aid distribution areas in Rafah. Gaza's health ministry reported. The ministry stated total aid seeker martyrs now reach 245, with over 2,152 injured since the targeting began. Gaza's overall death toll has risen to 4,924 since Zionist assault resumed, as airstrikes continue to hit civilian infrastructure across the besieged enclave. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Red Crescent reported a total communications blackout across Gaza on Thursday after occupation strikes severed internet and landlines. Emergency teams can no longer coordinate humanitarian responses, with rescue operations paralyzed. The Palestinian Telecommunications Regulatory Commission confirmed the infrastructure attack, warning of catastrophic consequences for civilians already facing bombardment and aid shortages. A UN spokesperson warned that Gaza's total communications blackout has crippled humanitarian operations, likely due to intense Zionist military actions. Emergency services are severed, leaving civilians without critical aid or coordination. The outage has cut all lifelines for rescue efforts, medical response, and vital information. Hamas condemned the Zionist occupation's deliberate cutting of communication lines as a new act of aggression within the ongoing genocide against the people of Gaza. In a statement, it warned that the move aims to paralyze vital sectors, especially medical and humanitarian services, and cautioned against further targeting of Gaza's remaining infrastructure.
The criminal Israeli occupation has deliberately cut communication lines, an aggressive new step in its ongoing genocide against our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Through this act, the occupation aims to paralyze vital sectors, foremost among them the medical and humanitarian sectors. We in Hamas warn of the escalating danger threatening our people as the remaining infrastructure and civil and humanitarian sectors are being targeted. We call on the international community to assume its responsibility to stop the aggression and ensure the protection of civilians and humanitarian and civilian facilities from the brutality of the fascist Israeli occupation.
Still with Palestine-related news, the resilience convoy to break the siege on Gaza departed Thursday morning for Misrata ahead of its journey through eastern Libya. The Joint Action Coordination for Palestine said Misrata's Municipal Council and the Libyan Aid Committee called on residents to join a popular reception for the convoy in support of the Palestinian people. The convoy, which began in Tunisia, includes over 1,500 activists from Tunisia and Algeria, with more expected to join in Libya.
The convoy, as I mentioned, is in Misrata today and will shortly head to Benghazi, then to the Libyan-Egyptian border, where it will cover a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers in a continuous journey. We have also been careful to arrive on the scheduled dates, which were previously scheduled within the framework of the management of this convoy, the Steadfastness Convoy.
The UN General Assembly overwhelmingly adopted a resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and lasting ceasefire in Gaza Strip. 149 member states voted in favor for the resolution, while 12 voted against and 19 abstained. The vote followed the Security Council's failure to pass a similar resolution last week due to a lone veto imposed by the United States. All the way to Morocco now, politicians and human rights activists have urged the Makhzen regime to end politically motivated prosecutions and release all prisoners of conscience. In a statement, the Moroccan Association for the Support of Political Prisoners expressed deep concern over the ongoing trials of journalists, lawyers, and bloggers, calling for respect for fair trial standards, freedom of expression, and fundamental civil and political rights.
We condemn the court ruling sentencing blogger Abdel Fattah al-Houfi to 4 years in prison, considering it a serious violation of fundamental rights. We warn of the grave consequences resulting from this verdict. We also highlight the ongoing prosecution of journalist Hamid al-Mahdawi and journalist Lubna al-Fallah in a context that raises concern about the judicial approach to activists and journalists and the lack of fair trial guarantees. We reject the 2-year prison sentence handed down to blogger Radwan al-Qastit as it represents yet another episode in an escalating series of attacks on freedom of opinion and expression, and the imprisonment of those who defend dignity, rights, and oppose normalization. A court session is also scheduled this week regarding the case of former Minister of Human Rights and lawyer Mohammed Ziyan in a context marked by serious legal irregularities.
Equally, the Moroccan Federation of the Democratic Left condemned the harassment, defamation, and what it called arbitrary arrests of its activists and advisors. In a statement, the party said these actions aim to silence dissenting voices inside and outside elected institutions, warning that the level of political and verbal abuse has become unacceptable.
We condemn the arrest of activist Mohammed Ben Ali, a member of the party's National Council, for expressing his opinion, an act that clearly violates freedom of expression and the right to critique. We stress that defending freedom of opinion and expression as well as the right to opposition within institutions is at the heart of any genuine democracy. Resorting to the language of repression, treason, and defamation only serves the logic of authoritarianism and the erosion of what remains of a free public space.
The collective of human rights defenders in Western Sahara called on the UN to launch an independent probe into Moroccan human rights violations in Western Sahara. Speaking before the UN Decolonization Committee, member Man La Yakhaf Tayyib denounced repression, discrimination, and landmine threats facing the Sahrawi people, holding Morocco directly responsible. He urged mine removal, victim compensation, and respect for the Sahrawi right to self-determination.
The
Sahrawi people continue to endure systematic repression, discrimination, and dispossession of their land and dignity. For years, Morocco has pursued a hostile policy aimed at uprooting them from their historic territory and erasing their cultural and geographic identity. This tragedy is worsened by the thousands of landmines scattered across Western Sahara, which claims innocent lives, yet Morocco has failed to remove them, warn civilians, or compensate victims. Under international humanitarian law and the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines, Morocco bears full responsibility for these losses.
Several Latin American and Caribbean representatives voiced strong support for the people of Western Sahara and their self-determination at the UN Special Committee on Decolonization, insisting on a free and fair referendum is the only solution. Venezuela reaffirmed its solidarity with Western Sahara's decolonization, while Nicaragua stressed the struggle is part of a broader fight against colonialism. Bolivia called the referendum the legitimate path to determine the Sahrawi people's future, declaring colonialism end inevitable. Meanwhile, Polisario Front representative Sidi Mohamed Omar accused Morocco of fearing a vote, knowing it would confirm Sahrawi independence.
We reaffirm our unwavering solidarity and full support for the brotherly Sahrawi people in their just struggle for self-determination, an unalienable right enshrined in international law, the UN Charter, and reaffirmed by resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly and African Union. Madam President, we regret that the Sahrawi people are still denied the ability to freely decide their national future, largely due to the failure to fully implement the MINURSO mandate of the past 3 decades. We firmly reject the illegal exploitation of Western Sahara's natural resources and any attempt to misframe this issue as something other than decolonization matter.
UN Decolonization Committee debates, Polisario Front appeals, and rulings from international courts continue to reinforce the legitimacy of Western Sahara's independence struggle, exposing Morocco's attempts to distort facts and buy political support for its illegal occupation. Marwa Al has more now.
Placing peoples under foreign rule and control is a denial of fundamental human rights and a violation of the UN Charter. This is the clear content of the UN General Assembly resolution of 1960. That resolution became the backbone of global efforts supporting the right of peoples to self-determination, foremost among which is the Sahrawi people, whose cause was officially listed as a decolonization issue by the United Nations in 1963 during the Spanish occupation, which was later replaced by Moroccan control in 1975 that brought nothing but death and displacement to the Sahrawi people. Since then, the Sahrawis have never abandoned their fight, despite attempts from the Mekhzen regime to impose the so-called autonomy plan as a substitute for full sovereignty.
The Sahrawi people have suffered from Morocco's illegal occupation and brutal repression for nearly 50 years. Nevertheless, our people, under the leadership of their sole and legitimate representative, the Polisario Front, have never abandoned their legitimate struggle for freedom and independence.
In the face of diplomatic setbacks, Morocco turned a strategy of buying recognition, offering up Sahrawi resources in exchange for false endorsements of its so-called sovereignty. But in 1975, the International Court of Justice denied that claim, affirming that Western Sahara is a distinct territory with no legal ties to Morocco. Rabat's efforts didn't stop at lobbying. It used migration as leverage, pressuring European partners into supporting its colonial ambitions in Western Sahara, trading people for political gains. But the Sahrawi people, through their sole legitimate representative, the Polisario Front, have countered with legal and diplomatic gains, from the UN's Decolonization Committee to the European Court of Justice, which ruled against Moroccan fisheries and agricultural deals that exploited Sahrawi resources.
This issue, this territory, is the last non-self-governing territory in Africa. My first point, the issue of Western Sahara remains an issue of decolonization, an issue which pits Morocco against the Polisario Front.
International law is clear. UN positions are firm. The only solution to the conflict in Western Sahara lies in the hands of its people, who will accept nothing less than full and diminished independence.
Moving on to other regional development, Libya's Presidential Council has prohibited all armed demonstrations and military vehicle movement in Tripoli effective Wednesday evening. Chairman Mohammed Al-Manfi ordered security forces, including the Tripoli Security Directorate, military police and internal security, to enforce a ban and maintain stability in the capital. Libyan Presidential Council head Mohammed Al-Manfi met with UN envoy Hannah Tati Wednesday to address Tripoli's security situation and efforts to stabilize the country. Manfi welcomed the international support for an inclusive Libyan-led dialogue, stressing that any political solution must reflect the people's will, free from external interference. The Libyan Presidential Council praised the UN envoy's efforts to engage Libyans in a transparent and inclusive process that fosters consensus and balanced representation. In a statement, the Council welcomed UNSMEL's launch of a national survey to gauge public opinion on the advisory committee's outcomes, stressing that credible consultations must involve all parties, not just one side.
We value the efforts of the United Nations mission and its commitment to involving Libyans in a transparent, participatory process that restores the people's voice in shaping their future, strengthens national consensus, and upholds inclusivity and balanced representation. In a context of deep division and multiple influential actors, national consultations cannot gain credibility if pursued unilaterally or used as tools for political dominance and imposition of a de facto reality. The involvement of a neutral international body, as with the mission's recent survey, is vital to ensure balance, prevent selective exploitation of these sensitive processes, and avoid legitimizing some actors while excluding others.
Shifting focus to another topical development, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday that his forces are gradually pushing back Russian troops in Sumy region, where Moscow has seized over 190 square kilometers in less than a month. Russian forces are trying to establish control in border villages north of Sumy, edging closer to the regional capital amid relentless missile and drone attacks.
There was a report from Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky today about the front, and primarily the Pokrovsk direction, the Kursk operation, and the border areas of Sumy region. Our units in Sumy region are gradually pushing back the occupier.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called the EU's 18th sanctions package against Moscow crucial, arguing increased economic pressure is necessary to push Russia to halt its war.
Once again, Russia is escalating instead of negotiating. That is why the German government will continue to work with its partners to increase the pressure of sanctions on Russia. Help for Kyiv, pressure on Moscow, both are needed now in order to exert the necessary pressure so that real negotiations on ceasefire can get underway.
To another global news story, Beijing pledged to uphold its commitments under a new trade agreement with Washington. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said Thursday the deal following talks between the two nations' leaders includes Chinese rare earth exports to the U.S. and reciprocal tariff reductions. Lin stressed China's expectations that both sides will fully implement the agreed terms.
China has always kept its word and delivered results. Now that a consensus has been reached, both sides should abide by it. We hope that the United States will work with China to implement the important consensus reached by the two heads of state, give full play to the role of the China-U.S. Economic and Trade Consultation Mechanism, and enhance consensus, reduce misunderstandings, and strengthen cooperation through communication and dialogue.
For more international news stories making waves, here's Hossein Burkani in the News in Brief.
Air India has confirmed that 241 people were killed in the recent crash of Boeing 787 bound for Gatwick Airport in London. Of the 242 people on board, there is one survivor who is currently being treated in a hospital. Indian media reported that the aircraft crashed 5 minutes after takeoff in a residential area known as Meghaninagar. The Director General of the Indian Civil Aviation Authority confirmed the details, and Air India expressed deep sorrow over the tragedy. U.S. President Donald Trump stated that Los Angeles experienced improved security over the past 2 nights, crediting the National Guard and U.S. Marine Corps for restoring stability. In a Truth Social post on Thursday, Trump said coordination between security and military agencies was key to containing recent unrest, warning the situation could have spiraled without military intervention. He also criticized California governor, claiming he lost control and should thank federal forces for helping restore order. Ukrainian officials say Russian drones hit the city of Kharkiv early Thursday, damaging an apartment building and striking a school courtyard. According to Mayor Ihor Terekov, at least 12 people were injured. Both Russia and Ukraine denied deliberately targeting civilians in the ongoing war which broke out in February 2022, thousands of civilian casualties have been reported since then. At least 3 people, 2 police officers and firefighter, were killed in southern Bolivia during clashes between security forces and supporters of former President Evo Morales, who were blocking highways. Protests also flared in Cochabamba, with demonstrators using firecrackers and stones, while police responded with tear gas. Morales, who led Bolivia from 2006 to 2019, is barred from running again, but remains popular among his base, who demand his return.
And that brings us to the end of our news program for tonight. Thank you for watching and good night.